I was driving home from my friend's house. It was late. I don't know the exact time, but if I had to guess, it was probably 2 or 3 a.m. I live 20 minutes away, which isn't too far since most houses around here are spread out. The rain and lack of street lights made it hard to see, though, so I was driving slower and more carefully. 5 minutes down the road, I pulled up to a traffic light. I had the red light, but there was a blue car on the other side, partially in the intersection. Its headlights and everything were on, but it was just sitting there at a green light. I couldn't tell if there was something wrong or if maybe they were asleep. When the lights changed, I drove forward slowly, maneuvering around them. I tried to discreetly look into their car as I passed, but the rain on my window blocked most of my view. Only a moment after passing them and driving down the road again, the blue car turned and started following me. So, it wasn't broken down after all. I kept my eye on the mirrors. I wouldn't consider myself a paranoid person, but the situation felt staged. Another minute down the road, the car's headlights started getting brighter in my mirrors as they pulled their car closer to what felt like just a couple of feet from my back bumper. In weather like this, that made me really uncomfortable. I looked back at the road but saw a small light pop up on my dashboard. It was a signal that one of my tires was low on air, a common signal, but it felt like an odd time for it to pop up, given the situation. I looked back in my mirrors, seeing the car still tailing me. They were so close. Their headlights almost made it hard to even see the actual car. I was just 4 or 5 minutes away from home, nearing the entrance to the neighborhood, when my dashboard started flickering. A new signal. Flat tire. My stomach dropped the second I saw that signal. I put all the pieces together and was almost 100% sure that this car behind me had done something. I drove another minute, hoping to make it closer to home, but I could feel my car sinking to the left. I was practically driving on the rims now. I had to pull over. The car behind me did the same. I should have called someone as soon as I parked, but I was so concerned and focused on what the person behind me was doing that it didn't even cross my mind. Though, even if I had called someone, it probably wouldn't have prevented what happened next. Once parked, 3 doors opened from the car and 3 men came out. I only had a few seconds to prepare and react, but I was helpless and defenseless. They ran up to my car, 2 on my side and 1 on the other. One of the men came right up to my window, yelling at me to open the door and pointing a gun at me. It happened so fast. I was just in some dazed state. I started to reach for the door, but the man by the back door smashed something against the window, shattering it. Then he reached his hand in and opened the back door. They were all still yelling, both at me and at each other. The man in the back reached across, opening the other back door, then reached in front of me to open my door. I was still just sitting there, holding my hands up now to show I wasn't a threat. I knew there was no way out of this, even if I did have a weapon. Once my door was opened, the man with the gun pulled me out of the car and slammed me on the ground. The oddest thing is, while I was on the ground, looking out at the rainy pavement, all I was thinking about was how cold and wet the pavement was, not about how I had a gun being pushed into the back of my head, or that I was being robbed and beaten. I think it was my head trying to distance itself from the traumatizing situation I was in. I wasn't on the ground for long before the men by the car called out. The guy holding me down hit me in the back of the head, causing me to ricochet off the pavement. I wasn't even sure if he hit me with the gun or just his fist because I was already numb. I'm surprised it didn't knock me out though. I heard their car doors close and then the sound of them driving away. I rolled over, still in a daze, and tried to pick myself up. They'd taken my phone, so I was forced to drive my car home and call the police when I got there, which ended up denting and damaging my rims anyway. The investigation went nowhere, determining only that the suspects had purposely placed small tire spikes in the road at the intersection. I'd crossed them and hit one. I got lucky to have only hit one spike, causing less damage than usual. They likely planned to ambush me as soon as I hit the trap, but in the end, it didn't make a difference. I'm 24, and I lived alone with my dog, Bear, in a cozy townhouse up until 3 months ago. I moved in when I turned 22, having a decent enough job. I loved the home, being the first place I'd ever rented for myself, but 2 years of happy living were ruined by one night. It was gloomy outside and raining heavily. It was my day off, so I was sitting on a chair in my living room, scrolling on my phone. It was 8 p.m., just an hour before I usually went to bed. Bear had been sitting by the back door for a while, looking outside. He started whining and ran up to me, which was his way of communicating that he needed to go outside. I got up, let him out, closed the door, and stood in the kitchen. While it was just a townhouse, there was a small fence separating the backyards, so I didn't have to worry about Bear running away or anything. Also, I should mention that Bear isn't a large dog at all. He's just fluffy and small, like a teddy bear. Not long after, maybe 15 or 20 seconds, I heard Bear whimper and bark. It was very clearly a cowering bark, like he was running away from something. Scared, I rushed to the door and looked out, seeing Bear running back towards me with his tail between his legs. Once he was inside, I leaned my head outside and scanned the backyard, expecting a coyote or something to be lurking by the fence, but nothing was there. I made sure Bear was okay and locked the door. He never acts like that, so I was really worried for him. I let him sit on my lap for the rest of the night. Over the next 30 minutes, he was constantly perking his head up and staring at the windows and doors, a different one each time. About 45 minutes later, Bear turned his head and stared at the window behind me, lowering his ears and growling. "Bear," I said, turning to look where he was focused. Right in the window, just a couple of feet from us, was a man staring back at me. He was almost pressed against the glass. I jumped up and screamed, stepping backward. The man sprinted away down the side of the house. Bear started barking again from the sudden chaos. I closed the blinds and checked all the others, making sure they were shut. From the quick glimpse I got, I didn't recognize the man. I didn't know who he was, what he was doing, or why he was staring at me. I tried to listen for any more indications that he was still around, but the rain outside was too loud, masking any possible sounds. Bear seemed calmer, so I stayed up a while longer, just to be safe, before going upstairs and letting Bear sleep in my room with me. It took a long time to fall asleep with so much on my mind. After an hour or so, I slowly dozed off. When I woke, Bear was standing upright by the bedroom door, staring at it. This was a terrifying sight to wake up to in the middle of the night. Not even seconds later, I heard something below me, a man talking. Then, not long after, another man on the other side of the house responded. Their footsteps were loud, and they didn't even seem to be whispering. It was like they didn't care if I knew they were inside. My bedroom door was locked, but I had nowhere else to go. I quietly went over to Bear, trying to keep him calm. I picked him up and went to the corner of my room, behind the bed. After a moment, I realized I hadn't heard any noises for about a minute. No steps or voices. That's when I took out my phone and called the police, whispering as softly as I could while giving them my address. Bear started to growl again, then began barking and whining as two sets of footsteps started making their way up the stairs. I begged the operator to send someone immediately. The two men started talking again, but it was hard to make out their words. "Hey, we just want to talk. We're not here to hurt you," one of them said. I screamed, "I called the cops. Leave now." There was a pause. Then another voice said, "We're here to help you." I didn't respond. I was busy trying to muffle my crying. "Open the door," one of them demanded. It got quiet again. I could only hear them breathing behind the door for what felt like an eternity before one of them started walking back down the stairs. I couldn't tell where they went or if they had left, but I was certain it was just one set of footsteps. The house fell silent. In the far distance, the soft sound of sirens started getting louder. A sense of safety finally began to return. As the sirens grew closer, I heard footsteps running out of the house downstairs, but I was still unsure where the other man was. I never heard him leave. When the police arrived, they searched the house, starting downstairs and then making their way upstairs. They knocked on my bedroom door. I hesitated to open it, still convinced the other man might be nearby. When I did open it, I saw an officer. I immediately told him about my concerns. He escorted me out of the house, while one of his partners continued searching. Nobody was found. The only evidence they discovered were wet footprints all around the house and an unlocked window, which I wasn't sure if I had locked or not. The thought terrified me. Being so confident the other man was still inside, yet finding no trace of him, it became impossible to sleep after that night. The uncertainty of what their intentions were, and the feeling of someone potentially still watching me was too much to bear. I moved out 3 months ago. Even now, miles away in a new apartment, I sometimes still feel like I'm not alone.